If I hadn't ripped the lock off that gate with my pickup truck, the entire west end of Pine Creek might have burned to ash. That thought still echoes in my mind every time I drive past the new smart gate, the one with the glowing keypad and reinforced posts, standing exactly where Patricia Travers once chained down my access point like she was protecting the crown jewels. It's strange how one dumb decision, one shiny padlock and a lawn chair, almost turned my quiet mountain town into a cautionary tale. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to the day it all started. It was a Monday, just a regular blue sky, birds chirping kind of Monday. My coffee was still hot, my dog Roscoe was doing his perimeter patrol like he was sniffing out terrorists, and I was halfway through replacing some boards on the chicken coop. You know, the kind of peaceful stuff you get to enjoy when you've left the corporate world behind and traded spreadsheets for sawdust. That piece ended the moment I saw her. Patricia Travers, HOA, president of Springvale Estates. 40-something, always overdressed, always underinformed, and constantly carrying a clipboard like it was her scepter. She came marching down the gravel road in oversized sunglasses that made her look like a Bond villain at a wine tasting. At first, I didn't think anything of it. She walked with that same smug stiffness she always had, like every step was a declaration of power. But then, she made a beeline for my gate. That gate marks the edge of my property. It's not fancy, just old metal fencing and a lockable swing latch. But it guards a narrow access road that runs behind my land. It's used maybe twice a year by the fire department to reach the ridge, especially when wildfire season kicks up. I should know. I helped build the water network they rely on. Anyway, Patricia reached into her designer purse, pulled out something shiny, and click! She snapped a brand new lock onto my gate. No warning, no knock on my door. Just padlocked it shut like she was sealing a crime scene. I jogged over, boots thudding on gravel, trying to stay calm even though I could already feel my pulse in my ears. "Hey, did you just lock my gate?" She didn't even turn her head. "Yes," she said coolly. "Per HOA Regulation 14B, all front-facing unsanctioned structures must remain secured at all times." I blinked. "This isn't a structure, Patricia. It's a gate. On private property. It's an easement for emergency services." She finally turned around and gave me this look. You know the one. That smile people give you when they think you're too dumb to understand how wrong you are. "It may be your gate, but it's visible from the community nature trail," she said, like she was reading from a holy scroll. Several residents, myself included, find it visually jarring. I've submitted multiple complaints. Since no action was taken, I resolved the issue myself. I stared at her like she'd grown antlers. "You submitted complaints about my gate?" She nodded, all proud of herself like a kid who finally solved a riddle. "3 complaints," she said, all unresolved. So she took action. The thing is, I could have just cut the lock right then. I had bolt cutters in the shed and a heavy-duty chain hook on the ATV, but I didn't. Not because I was scared. Patricia's built like a wind chime and has about as much legal weight as one, but because I knew what she didn't. 10 feet behind that gate, under a rusted steel hatch buried beneath gravel and pine needles, was the only access valve for the town's emergency backup water system. And the woman who just locked it? She had no idea she'd just committed a felony in flip-flops. I spent the rest of that Monday half watching the gate from my porch, waiting for Patricia to get bored and move on. But nope, she doubled down. Around noon, she came back, this time dragging a folding lawn chair like she was setting up camp. She parked herself directly across from my locked gate, on her side of the trail, of course, and cracked open a bottle of kombucha like she was settling in for a matinee. She sat there for hours, just watching, glaring at anyone who came near. At one point, the Amazon guy tried to deliver a package to me, and she actually stood up and redirected him. I kid you not. Told him to use the back entrance. There is no back entrance. By sundown, the temperature had hit 101 degrees, and the fire alerts were already popping up on the local news station. But I figured she'd give up soon. I mean, surely even Patricia had a limit. Worst case, I thought, I'll call the fire department in the morning and let them know about the gate. Big mistake. That night, just after midnight, I saw the first flash. Lightning. It lit up the eastern ridge like a strobe light. And not long after, I smelled smoke. I ran upstairs, opened my emergency scanner app, and sure enough, a wildfire had ignited in the canyon. And the wind was pushing it west, straight toward Pine Creek. Within half an hour, I heard sirens. Red and white lights tore through the trees as 3 fire trucks rumbled down the trail, GPS guiding them right to the one access point that led straight to the backup water supply. My gate. I threw on jeans and boots, grabbed my flashlight, and ran out. I was hoping, praying, someone brought bolt cutters. They hadn't. What they did bring was confusion. A firefighter jumped out, walked right up to the gate, and pulled. It rattled, locked. Before I could say anything, someone behind him shouted, "We've got visual on the fire line, 30 minutes out." And then, out from the shadows came Patricia. Now in a bathrobe, wine glass in hand, she strolled over like this was a backyard wine tasting. "I'm sorry," she said to the firefighter. "This is private property. I can't authorize entry without a formal HOA access request." "I kid you not." She said that while the canyon was on fire. The firefighter blinked, like maybe his helmet was muffling her insanity. "Ma'am, this gate leads to a registered emergency access point. We need that valve online now." She gave him this little dismissive wave. "Then bring paperwork." I didn't wait. I turned and sprinted to my shed, grabbed a tow chain, backed my pickup into position, and latched that sucker to the lock. I hit the gas. Snap. The sound of that padlock breaking apart was like music. The gate flew open, swinging wide, and the trucks rolled in like the cavalry. Patricia screamed something about property damage and lawyers, but no one listened. One firefighter literally tossed her a pamphlet, probably titled "How Not to Obstruct a State Emergency Response." Within hours, they'd tapped into the backup supply. The fire was contained before sunrise. One home up in the foothills was lost before they got water pressure, but the rest of the town, my town, was safe. The next morning, I gave a full statement to the county incident team. They took photos, asked questions, nodded a lot. Patricia, gone. Vanished like smoke. But her lock, I kept it. Hung it on a nail on my porch with a sign that read, "Caution, may cause wildfires." I thought it was over, but no. Patricia was just getting started. The next morning felt weirdly quiet, like the town was holding its breath. Smoke still hung low over Pine Creek, clinging to tree branches and backyards like a ghost. I figured maybe I'd get a few awkward nods at the diner or a thumbs up from the fire crew, but I didn't expect a full-on standing ovation. As soon as I stepped into Bailey's Cafe, everything stopped. Forks frozen midair. Coffee pots paused mid-pour. Rosie, the owner, leaned out from behind the counter and squinted at me like I'd walked in with a cape and theme music. "You the guy with the gate?" someone asked from the back. I nodded cautiously. Didn't realize ripping off a lock would turn me into a local legend. An older woman near the window scoffed. "It wouldn't have been if that woman hadn't chained up the only emergency access in the entire district. My son's house was 10 feet from the fire line," Rosie chimed in. "You know she filed a complaint against you this morning? Claimed you destroyed HOA equipment. Sheriff already tossed it in the trash, but thought you should know." I almost laughed. Almost. But then she handed me a stack of 4 envelopes, all with that HOA letterhead, all delivered before sunrise. The first was an $800 fine for unauthorized demolition of HOA hardware. The second, a cease and desist accusing me of creating unsafe precedent for future emergency responses. The third one tried to spin the whole situation into some bizarre claim about inappropriate vehicular use on shared land. And the fourth, was a summons to the HOA's Emergency Conduct Review Panel, which, as far as I knew, didn't even exist before that morning. I sat there in the diner with my coffee going cold, trying to process it. The lock was hers, the property was mine, the water access was federally registered, and I was the one being punished? That's when I called Darren. Darren Fletch, local paralegal. My buddy since forever. owed me a favor from last summer when I helped him install a gray water system at his cabin. He picked up on the first ring. "Let me guess," he said. "Patricia?" "Worse," I said. "She's got paperwork now." An hour later, we were in his office, surrounded by a sea of documents, HOA bylaws, and municipal zoning maps spread across every surface like we were planning a bank heist. Darren flipped through her complaints, his eyebrows climbing with every page. "She's not just overreaching," he muttered. "She's pole vaulting into lunacy. Look here. She's quoting HOA bylaws from 1986. Half this crap isn't even valid anymore. Can we hit back?" "Oh, we're not just hitting back," he said with a grin. "We're going to build a trebuchet." He pulled up a file on his screen, a scanned PDF from 2017. It was the original easement agreement, signed by the previous HOA president. In it, crystal clear, "Perpetual emergency access shall not be obstructed or regulated by private associations or individuals." "That," Darren said, tapping the screen, "is your silver bullet." But it didn't stop there. He kept digging. Turned out the county had flagged that exact access point as a critical infrastructure route after the fires of 2017. And then, FEMA had funded a valve upgrade in 2021, turning it into a regional emergency asset under Homeland Security oversight. Patricia hadn't just broken HOA guidelines, she'd obstructed a federally protected fire access. That could mean fines, liability, even criminal charges if pushed far enough. I stared at Darren's screen, then slowly started to smile. So this wasn't just a Karen meltdown. This was a full-blown paper war. And lucky for me, I'd brought a cannon. That same afternoon, Darren and I sent the files to 3 places: the county zoning office, the regional infrastructure board, and the state fire marshal's office, just to be thorough. And then we waited. We didn't have to wait long. By the next morning, I got a call from Councilman Hargrove, who sounded like he'd just swallowed a thumbtack. "Jake," he said, "we're holding an emergency town meeting tonight. Public. Open mic. Bring those documents. Bring all of them." "Is Patricia going to be there?" A pause. "She RSVP'd and requested a projector." Oh boy, when I walked into the Pine Creek Town Hall that evening, the place was packed. Standing room only. People were leaning against walls, perched on windowsills. The air was thick with that mix of coffee, stress, and wildfire residue. Firefighters were there. So were HOA members, city engineers, even a few journalists. And right there in the front row, wearing a perfectly pressed white pantsuit and that smug, "I own this town" smile, was Patricia Travers. She was already setting up a slideshow labeled "Visual Safety and Community Harmony, a Case for Responsible Gate Management." I nearly burst out laughing. The mayor opened the meeting with a simple question. "Can someone explain what happened at Gate 14B during last night's fire?" I stood, walked to the front, unrolled a giant blueprint across the table, and said loud enough for even the back row to hear, "Gate 14B isn't just a gate. It's the only direct access to the Ridgecrest emergency water valve. This is confirmed in the town's 2017 emergency response plan. It's tied to the fire department's GPS system. And yes, it's located on my private land under a federally acknowledged easement." A hush fell over the room. Patricia, of course, raised her hand immediately. "Excuse me," she said. "I was under the impression that the gate, while on private land, falls within the visible zone of Springvale Estates, which is subject to visual harmony ordinances outlined in our community charter." The mayor waved her down. "You'll have your turn, Mrs. Travers." I turned to her. "You're right about one thing. It is private property. Mine. But it's also part of a federally designated utility corridor, which overrides any local HOA rules. That's not an opinion. That's U.S. code." Then I handed the mayor's assistant a folder. Inside, the original signed easement, the county emergency designation, the FEMA-funded upgrade approval, and, best of all, the emails. Oh yeah, screenshots, chats, group messages between Patricia and her inner circle, people she'd bullied onto the board, saying things like, "He won't be able to prove it's a federal easement. Let him rack up fines. He'll cave eventually. Jenkins will back me. I got his gazebo variance approved last year. The room went dead silent. Then someone snorted. Darren, sitting in the back row, whispered, "She's playing HOA Game of Thrones with lawn chairs." Patricia tried to rally. She stood, cleared her throat, and said in her best politician voice, "At no point was I informed that this gate had critical status." "Had I known—" "Wrong," I cut in. "You were. In 2018, your predecessor received and acknowledged this designation in writing. You just never bothered to read the HOA's own archives." The mayor leaned back, eyes narrowed. "Mrs. Travers, do you dispute that you placed a private lock on an emergency access point during an active fire alert?" Patricia hesitated. I was acting in the best interests of visual cohesion." A firefighter in the third row burst out laughing. Applause broke out. Someone in the crowd shouted, "Get her off the board." The mayor slammed the gavel once. "We'll be reviewing civil and legal liability against both the individual and the HOA board for obstruction of emergency services." Patricia? She just slowly packed up her projector, slid her clipboard into a massive floral tote bag, and bolted, head down, sunglasses on, while half the room filmed her exit. It was over, or so I thought. Until the next morning, when I found a new letter on my porch. From the HOA board. Finding me. Again. The letter was thick, pretentious, and practically dripping with legal-sounding nonsense. It said I was being fined for unauthorized demolition of HOA-installed security features and vehicular misconduct on shared use ground. Yep. After everything, the fire, the evidence, the town hall meltdown, the board still had the audacity to fine me for saving the town. But here's the kicker. It was unanimously approved. That's when I realized something I should have seen much earlier. Patricia might have left the building, but her fingerprints were still all over the place. She'd spent months stacking the HOA board with yes men, favors, and fear. Half the board owed her something. The other half were just tired of being yelled at in emails. This wasn't petty anymore. It was calculated. So I called Darren. He answered with a yawn and a mutter. "Please tell me she didn't send more kombucha." "Nope. She sent the HOA after me. Again." We met that afternoon. Same war room setup. Blueprints, bylaws, and now a flash drive full of HOA email chains Darren had gotten through a legal loophole called a member transparency request. And oh boy, it was gold. There was one message from Patricia herself that read, "Don't worry, he can't afford to fight this forever. We just need to bury him in process." Another one, "If we suspend the easement agreement temporarily, it'll delay any county action." She even wrote, and I quote, "It's not about water. It's about setting the tone. The neighborhood needs discipline." That was the moment I stopped laughing. Because this wasn't just HOA power tripping anymore. This was someone weaponizing bureaucracy to punish dissent. But what Patricia forgot, or never knew, is that my easement agreement came with a clause. A very old, very obscure clause. Buried deep in HOA charter revision. 3B. Any homeowner may petition for an emergency board vote in cases where demonstrable harm to public safety or community reputation has occurred. The best part? It only needed 15 signatures. I had that before dinner. By the next evening, there was a new meeting on the books. A vote. To remove Patricia Travers from the HOA board permanently, and to review board conduct during the wildfire incident. I didn't need to exaggerate a single thing. When the meeting opened, I stood at the front of the community center, in jeans, work boots, and the same flannel I'd worn when I broke the lock, and laid it all out. The fire, the lock, the documents, the emails, the intent behind it all. Patricia didn't show, but someone brought her lawn chair as a prop. It sat in the corner, empty and ridiculous. When the vote was counted, it wasn't even close. Patricia? Removed. The board? Reprimanded and partially restructured. And me? The fines were dropped, the HOA issued a formal apology to the county emergency office, and, in the most poetic turn of all, they agreed to reimburse me for the damage to the gate and cover the cost of a new emergency access system. We installed it the following week, A smart gate with an encrypted digital override linked directly to the fire department. No more padlocks, no more lawn chairs, no more clipboard coups. At the unveiling event, part fire drill, part block party, a firefighter handed me a small plaque that read, Community Safety Guardian. I didn't know what to say, so I just laughed and asked, Does it come with a siren? Everyone cracked up. But here's the moment I'll never forget. Later that afternoon, just as the event was winding down, Patricia appeared. No clipboard, no speech, just sunglasses, her little dog, and a tight plastic smile. She didn't say a word, just stood at the edge of the crowd, watching. And when the firefighters demonstrated the new gate, how it opened seamlessly with a remote signal, she quietly turned and walked away. Maybe, finally, she understood. That real community safety isn't about visual harmony or how your mailbox is painted. It's about access, protection, responsibility, and sometimes all it takes to stop a disaster is one guy, one truck, and the guts to say, no more locks.